Well, hello, this is the Final Boss, and this is In the Same Time. One of our Twitch viewers sent this in. I'm very excited to share and to edit this. Probably do 5+ pages, something around there, and see what happens. But I'm very excited. I always really enjoy, this is a fan fiction in Harry Potter universe. I always think fan fiction is great. I think it's really important for developing writing. I think it can be a really helpful tool because, it's sort of like writing in a lot of ways can be juggling like 10 things at once, like your world building, your magic system, your character development, your character design, your narrative, and your prose, and la 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 la. And so, one of the nice things about, doing fan fiction is the fact that, or doing fiction in even an existing universe. I know that people, um, have different terms, but is the fact that you can take some of that workload off your plate. You can say, hey, I'm not going to worry about, the magic system. I already have the magic system defined. I already have some predefined characters, so I know that, hey, this is kind of the cadence that that character is going to talk in, things like that. So really, really helpful. And yeah, let's jump in. I love Harry Potter, so I'm probably going to enjoy this greatly. Fred and George sat in the Great Hall, side by side, as they'd always been at Hogwarts. Okay, so the only thing I would flag here is your very, very first sentence. Um, you always wanted to have a pop, a hook, something that can turn my expectations a little bit. So one thing I would say is um, all the students survived. Yeah, so I'll read through this paragraph and we'll kind of take a look at how we can tune that first sentence up if there are some opportunities. Their eyes scanned the room, this time when all the students arrived for dinner. Most people, their eyes looked for commotion, but to them they sought out targets. Last year, the target had been Professor Quirrell, snowballs at his turban. Yes, that's a good book reference. The year before that, they stole from Filch's own office a priceless item in front of the Marauders map. This year, okay. Okay, so Fred and George sat in the Great Hall. I would just see, like, looking for targets. Seeking out targets. Yeah, seeking out targets. Because, thankfully, again, it's like part of the wonderful part of writing in an existing universe is that there's already established information, right? And so the goal for the reader or the goal for the writer is how much of an imaginative experience can I give you with and specific with as few words as possible. So because this is pre-existing, we know Fred and George, red hair. We don't really have to spend too much time describing them if we don't want to, unless there's something distinctive, especially given the fact that your audience already knows who Fred and George is. And likewise, we don't need to know, and so you can even include this like dinner. Fred and George as they sat in the great house, like, oh, the poof, the dinner appeared, or whatever it may be. Last year, their target him first Krill at his turban. Again, like it's sort of like the man's is a bit like vague, so in the first paragraph, like those little weird grammar things, I'll be a little bit more exacting about, and then we'll kind of zoom, go. I'll focus a little bit more on the macro things, but the first paragraph I'll always zoom in on grammar. Um, Last year, their target had been Professor Quirrell. Casting. So this is a bit of a grammar thing, but I almost am kind of curious. So like one thing you have an opportunity to do. So like this is a fine recap. Um, but I would also, I mean, last year, Ved cast chanted snowballs at Professor Quirrell's turban. Um, and to some degree, I wonder if you can get because when you have a character looking for targets, you have a really great opportunity to describe the scene in character. So, so some degree, I would say, hey, you don't have to establish too much. Um, debating. Yeah, I would just say this is like optional. Maybe I'll put like an underline on it for optional. That's optional. And we know that it's the winter season because, it's winter. But yeah, and then so like we don't need to know that it's Fred's eye. So again, this is a great man. You guys should follow my TikTok. I do little recommendations like this. Um, I know I'm such an influencer now. What do you know? But yeah, Fred's eyes continue to sweep across the room. I don't need to know that it's Fred. So like, and you can communicate that Fred's the point of view. So one tricky thing is like, which point of view character are we in? It looks like we're in Fred's point of view, because I see Fred kind of going through, and then they're kind of a collective point of view of Fred and George. It's a little tougher to pull off collective POV. So just make sure that, hey, which brother is the viewpoint? Who's the person whose eyes we're seeing through? So Fred, so we can establish gender, right? Fred speared a blood sausage with his fork as it appeared, and he glanced, across. There were too many new students this year. At the Slytherin table, whatever. And then, a new girl occasionally glanced around. You can feel the corner of his mouth. So you can feel the corner of his mouth reach his cheeks and the rush of excitement through his body. Um, and sometimes you can use interiority to communicate that too, right? Fred and his brother Arnie led in the direction of the Slytherin table. Which one? So like, great dialogue here. I love that we already know they're both kind of on the same goal. Malfoy look alike. Oh, I guess it's two words. I didn't even know that, so I trust them. Oh, Malfoy looks. Oh, maybe it is one word, and you're just lying to me, Google. You betrayer. Third year glanced through the entrance, and Peeves says she ordered a few drunk bombs the other day. One of Lockhart's classes got canceled. Okay, so this is in the Chamber of Secrets time. I wonder if that's worth saying. Like, is it worth? I don't know. I mean, maybe people don't care, but it's nice to kind of know that I mean, for me, it'd be like, oh great, we're starting in Chamber of Secrets. You know, Obviously there's signals like, right, if you're, spoilers for like a decades old book, but like if you're like, oh, Fred was, if George was grieving that Fred had passed away, you'd be like, oh, this is after the last book, right? I think that was how it went. Or was it? Yeah, I think Fred passed. Yeah. But yeah, somebody's gonna judge me, Grace, really. Anyways, Malfoy looked like 30-year gangster with entrance. Peeves says he ordered a few dung bombs the other day. Boom, best mate. She was waiting until she left the hall and got to follow her. They started out of the Great Hall, which was starting to fill out with hungry students. Their absence was unnoticed. Thankfully, with their combined 4 eyes and taller stature, the girl's mouth would color carry her hair. They kept pace through the crowd. So I like this. I'm not really sure what their objective is yet. Like, I don't know exactly. Like, not sure yet whether they want to, troll her. Since they talk about trolling. Get it? Sorry. That was a dad joke. Okay, this is all really embarrassing. No, it's great. This is all good. Everything seems fine. When I troll her, since they're talking about trolling Quirrell earlier, so a lot of it's just knowing what you're setting up, or just thinking about what you're setting up versus what you're paying off, right? So in the beginning, we say they are looking around, right? So they're scanning for targets, and the example of a target we've been given is the time we gave Professor Quirrell a hard time and did mischief. But over here, they're kind of saying, hey, this lady at least seems like she could be a like a partner to us, right? Like best mate. I don't know if that if they're referring to her yet, but want to troll her or whether they want to partner. I think they want a partner, but yeah. Wait until she left the hall and got up to follow her. So again, this is another great writing thing that I think about a lot, which is those little middle words aren't always so necessary. The two brothers waited until the girl left the great hall and followed her. So what's great about that is it implies a lot of like the got up. So like so like the extreme example of that, where you can say the two brothers waited until the girl left the great hall, got up, walked out of the door, and went down the hallway to follow her. Right? Like those extra actions, you can describe them, but they're not communicating much. You know, anything surprising to us, right? And so usually like those little mechanics that we could kind of guess, like, oh, if they're following her, they obviously got up, they obviously went out into the hallway. Um, I would also use a little bit of scene description, right? Because you've had great dialogue, but we've been in like interior thought here, right? Like we've been sort of in narrative interior thought, saying, oh, last year we did this, the next year we did that. You want to work in concrete details like action, spearing sausage with a fork and taking a bite, whatever. There are too many students. At the table, a new girl occasionally glanced around before turning her food. You can feel the current smell. Okay. But there are some opportunities that you could say, oh, it's like the Slytherins, the evening light, you know, cast made this girl's very pale hair, look a certain way, right? And those are ways that you can give cues as to saying, hey, this is going on in the scene. It's nighttime. We're in the Great Hall. There's a bunch of candles overhead. We're in the Great Hall. There's a storm overhead. Maybe it's really stormy out that day and it's enchanted to look like the night sky. Those are tools that you can pull in your tool belt to either set the scene, then also add subtext. Because let's say you know, they look up and it's stormy and they both smile and they say, "Hey, this is going to be a wild, stormy night." And you kind of know that storm and mischief and stuff are going to occur, right? And that's what Rowling does, right? Like when the troll gets in the first book, the Great Hall is like Halloween is like wild and and crazy and intense. And if you think about, oh, they're using the scene. Yes, you have to establish the scene, but they're also saying, oh, if we establish the scene in a certain way, it can kind of like buff and underline some of the things we want, some of the emotional beats of the scene we want to reinforce. All right, I'm gonna go faster. Sorry. Absence of notice continuing. Oh, we're into a jam-packed sea of students going the opposite way. But yeah, I mean, you can give us a little bit of like a play-by-play. What's it like for them to like look over the crowd? Like Fred pushed a brown-haired student out of the way. Miss Professor McGonagall like started looking at him and he ducked behind before she could see that he'd pushed a first year. And then, that play-by-play, he ducked behind a suit of armor, right? Because then we're starting to set up, oh, there's suits of armor. We're in the hall. Those types of things. So remember to kind of use those tools in your tool belt and you can give us like a play by play of these little moments, like, right, like this is interesting, right? This is essentially a chase scene. You can draw the chase scene out, right? Yeah, and so like the summary, I mean, I think the best or one of the helpful ways of thinking about summary versus scene, right, is if you watch, you know like a sport, like esports, League of Legends, right? And you say, "Oh, TSM just demolished, um, Samsung Blue." I don't even know if they're still a team, but yeah, TSM demolished Samsung Blue. Got them, and that's summary, right? Like we kind of have the whole game distilled into one line. But the reason people watch these games is they like the play-by-play commentary. I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you know." so and so, like so and so's ahead in farm by like 50 CS, and the jungler is heading down the river. The jungler is hiding in the bush, and like you're getting like all these little detail, and you're like, oh, he's about to pounce. I don't know if you play League, but I know a lot of people on Twitch do, so maybe that's the whatever. don't don't laugh too hard at me. Okay, anyways, what do you want the girl looking for the bring expression? Friend George, we know what you did. Okay, for try maneuver. So I think your dialogue is like right on point. I think your dialogue is right on point. I think, and that's something to think about, right? As a writer, you can say, hey, I might be over-indexing a little bit on my dialogue ability. Like I know these characters really well. I can just make that dialogue pop. And so, as a writer, you can kind of be strategic about it and say, hey, I'm gonna have more of the scenes lean on dialogue and have less summary and less action or whatever that may be, because again, like, and that's the same with my writing. Like you always just want to play to your strengths and say, oh, I think if this seems to be something that I kind of can have a higher quality product around, I can shift some things. So that's kind of more of what I'm putting out. Your dialogue writing. Yeah, it's like play to your strength. Yeah, exactly. And we know how you did it. We just want to know if you need any more supplies, because our stocks are collecting dust. Since you're one of our most respected customers, of course. As bad as my ability to strike screen. Well, there you go. See, that's why I always say this. Why you cannot be your own judge as a writer. Just our brains as writers are not on our side, sadly. Our brains are trying to keep us safe, keep us, at least mine is like, oh, if I put this work out there, someone's gonna say, oh, mean things, or it's not good enough, or whatever, and so our brains will predict that and say, no, 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 it's not good enough. But that's why it is so important to get other folks to read your stuff, because they can be a little bit more unbiased and just sort of say, hey, this is stronger, this is areas to work on. And yeah, like I think like from what I'm reading, like your dialogue is definitely like way above bar, above average, right? And so I think like I would say, oh yeah, like lean into that. Can you like things that are getting described in action and things that are getting described through summary, can some of those get converted to dialogue, and it'll just make it very, very snappy. They give another perspective for sure. Yeah. We just want you to know if you need more any supplies, because our stocks are collecting dust. Since you are one of our most respected customers, of course. So I thought, did they sell her the dung bombs? I don't remember. I didn't think she got from them. I could be crazy. Which one? Peeves said. Yeah, so like, yeah, so why does he need Peeves? Like, you know, if he heard from Peeves, then doesn't seem to have sold them to her. This is a new pair that isn't part of Harry Potter. Got it, got it, got it. But the girl is. But Fred and George are. Yeah, but I still don't know like if he's like. So then but again like in that I should probably establish they don't know who they are during that first conversation. Interesting. They don't know who they are, who she is. Okay, but then they say that like since you are one of our most respected customers, that's the only thing that kind of confused me a little bit. Is like I thought, because I was like, oh, I don't think she got the dung bombs from them, but I'll keep cruising. Girl looked at them, her attention swinging between their two faces, waiting for them to continue their speech. Fred noticed that her eyes were dark, almost black, with a tinge of gray, and her hair, despite the Malfoy color, and the same straightness. I think that's just easy fix. Same straightness. About the mindful color and the same straightness. And the same straightness had a bit more white. The only other thing I would flag in her hair, it still is like, like I think by doing the Malfoy color, you're already communicating so much, right? Like by whenever you're describing a character, taking time to do scene description, you always want to think about what is the thing the reader needs help to imagine because it's different than what they would expect, right? You know, if I describe a scene, like an example of that, if I describe a scene, a cowboy walks into a bar, two hands on his revolvers. The reader immediately thinks, oh, they're probably wearing like a leather duster and a cowboy hat and all these things. So I don't necessarily need to describe those as much, right? Um, I'm going to do a writing tip on this. But if I describe the same thing, cowboy rocks into the bar, hands on his revolvers, and a little pink feather cap on his head. Then I'd be like, whoa, I need to describe that. The reader would not have expected. They would have expected a cowboy hat. So whenever something is going to be different enough to be notable, that's usually when it's really helpful to do the scene or the character description. But what's great is like, and her hair, despite the Malfoy color, and her hair, a tinge of gray, I don't know. But like, I don't know if I didn't even know hair came in a whiter shade than the Malfoy hair, right? Like they're extremely, kind of pale individuals, and so it is like, hey, is it necessary? Like, Malfoy white, I already kind of know that she has, ghostly white hair, and so to some degree, you might be able to remove this extra detail because usually you don't have to add extra detail if the reader is already astounded with the tinge of gray. Her eyes are dark, almost like the fringed hay. And she had the same. Yeah. Anyways, she could have passed off from what off as one just from the looks. Still, eyes narrowed, mouth turned upwards into what might have been a sneer. She looked every part the child of Lucius Malfoy, and it's high-class snobbery and all. The other thing that kept her separate from the oil-haired goose and his spawn was her not hurling insults at them just for if he dared say so out loud. Not interested, the girl waved, but Fred and George stayed put. Are you done? I like this one. I know it's coming from her. I would wonder if it's something more specific, like, excuse me, I have potions and don't want to be late. Or if it's night, because I know this is dinner, it could be astronomy. Excuse me, I have astronomy and don't want to be late. We also need to know your name. Otherwise, we're just going to call you Slytherin Girl from now on. The girl paused. So moments implied. So again, it's sort of like what descriptions can I strip that will be implied, that will be, it's like the one of the things in prose that's really, really helpful is how do I get the most out of the least words? And if I can get away with using one word, the girl paused instead of the girl paused for a moment, if moments already implied, boom, that just gives you more space. A lot of it is just how much can I communicate with as few words as possible so the reader can imagine more, right? Because really, reading is like a guided imagination exercise. It's like guided meditation. But a lot of us can imagine stuff pretty well, and so the thing you want to call out in your text are the things that wouldn't occur on average to someone's imagination, right? And I think about it, quickly pushed her way through them. I'll be going to my dormitory. Good night. Fred and George looked at one another and smirked. Slytherin Girl. It's as good a name as any. To the boys, Hogwarts housed a great number of students. Prospective wizards understood this was the first stepping stone towards the greater wizarding world beyond the castle walls. Both being in the same house did not come as a surprise. The real surprise came when the two of them would wander the school's large halls, bristling with students heading. So this seems like a pretty big scene jump to summary. So that's the only question is how much do you need to recap on this, given the fact that much of the audience reading this will most likely have a pretty good sense of who these characters are, what their background is, what their goals are, and so I would attempt to like lean like maybe try a draft where you lean really heavily on that. You just assume that someone is in the middle of rereading book two and they pick this up and they kind of got a lot of it in their pocket outside of like the big things. Because I know even J.K. Rowling did this quite a bit in her earlier books, where like the first chapter she would do a lot of recap, but a lot of readers kind of they'd not they did not appreciate that as much because I think even in the Chamber of Secrets she's like, well, this was a special room because this boy was magic. It's like TMI. But not necessarily. It's just because I mean, if you were writing this in a vacuum, you would probably need to put all this in. But because like because this writing isn't in a vacuum, right? Like you're writing to an audience, to someone with a mind, with memories, with all these things. And so what's great is you can lean on them. You can say, I'm pretty sure that if someone is reading this, they have most likely read Harry Potter. Also, like half the people alive in this world have read Harry Potter, or at least are familiar with it. And you can probably open that door to say, I can save time. And that's what it all comes down to. How do I deliver a unique, imaginative experience to someone with as few words as possible? And if they can already imagine this on their own, having read it, and then one of the schools would bristling the students, whatever, could easily get in there. But the best part was when Peeves would sneak them out, drop a letter at their feet. That was no different. As the girls swooped into the corridor, they got ready. Peeves swooping over their heads. Mail, you better read it. He's already in the next corridor by the time George showed it. Slithering girl. 4 canary cranes, 1 pygmy puffs. Was this? I don't remember if they were doing because the fainting fancies were part of the. I'm gonna be a total Harry Potter nerd. Fainting fancies were part of the skiving snack boxes, but that didn't happen until book 4. That didn't happen until Goblet of Fire, if I'm pretty sure. Um, I do like that Peeves in this is giving them mail. I think this is a really awesome addition. Super smart, right? And you're like, hey, like these are all mischief makers. They're working together. Like that is really, really smart. Um, yeah, that's awesome. Fred noticed George's hand stained with black. Hey, flip it over. There's more on the back. The order continued with a message tied to as well. X2 fainting fancy. If either of you or Peeves, if I find either of you or Peeves ratting me out, I will hex Peeves, then the two of you before you can even leave the school. You don't know what I look like? Hey, Fred, I think she likes us, said Fred, smiling as if he forgotten his birthday wish. You've got to make a supply run for a few of these items. I know the perfect place, but we'll get it all later. Up for a game of exploding snap with Harry, George? I wasn't sure if they did any creation stuff, but they were younger. Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. And they had a following. Yeah, actually, I'd never. You never saw me. Oh, I see. Okay, got it. This is like a. There. That's stronger. 3 days later, how am I doing on pages? 4 or 5. Okay, I'll see. It's getting a little late, but I will go through the next chapter and then I will, or at least a little bit further in. 3 days after the Lockhart incident. Oh, Lockhart incident. Okay, that was from her class. Okay, R. Malfoy. I mean, because to some degree, this is like a very, um, you know, this is a very like straightforward way into a chapter. One My headphones hate me. One thing you could do is really lean into the details, right? So like 3 days later, Lockhart was still picking dung bits out of his hair, and Aura, Malfoy, whatever. So I think like using those like zinger things can recap us, right? Because that's like three after the Lockhart incident. That's not as specific as saying picking bits out of your hair. That'll really help the reader recall, right? And so a lot of this is just, how do you steer someone else's imagination, which is like fun, but also pretty tricky. I'm ready to Quidditch. Patrick Nielsen and Pansy, broom in her hand, came into a scene. No, I think you're doing great. She came to the quick conclusion. I think one of the ones that I always recommend, let me see. And actually, you should do this if you have an extra copy of Harry Potter. You should definitely do this and do it for the book. Your era, because her writing changes as the eras change. So do this for Chamber of Secrets, and you will get a different outcome than whatever else. But where is it? Wow, man, I have a lot of. There you go. This is the one I would. This is from the Final Boss editing website. How to save your writing with a pack of highlighters. This is an example. I don't remember which book this was. Christopher Moore. Oh, I think this was like some random book I received. But like going through and saying this is scene description, this is dialogue, like this is action, and have a different color for each of them is one of the most helpful tools. Like go through Chamber of Secrets and just look at the proportions, right? So like I think I had blue as interiority, blue is the thoughts, red is or the pink is action lines, like visible things that are happening. Um, yeah, kind of interiority. I think orange was dialogue or something else. I don't remember how I broke it down in this one. Oh, here we go. There it is. Narrator, interiority, dialogue, action, scene description, sound, smell, taste, imagery. Like doing just a breakdown of this for a chapter can be huge. Like it's I literally like I cannot recommend this enough. It will be really helpful. You can see I've done it, on things. And I forget, yeah, the green was dialogue, I guess. Yeah, there we go. See, green dialogue. I forget all the colors, but I guess blue and green look the same to me because I'm blind. Um, but 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 this is what I would recommend. Like if I was like, what's one thing well, that's why you got to read the Final Boss blog. I'm just kidding. No, but that's probably one thing. Like sort of like what if you go, like, what would be the one thing that I think could really, really help dial it in? I think you're actually really close. I mean, I don't think it's that necessary, but it's really helpful. Like, how does J.K. Rowling start a chapter? What is she leading with? Is she leading with dialogue? Is she leading with? I mean, and I can guarantee more chapters she leads with dialogue than you'd expect. A lot of chapters she leads with a big action. So like that can really help you say, okay, what color shows up at the beginning? How is it evolving? And what should I kind of do from there? All right, Overhead or Hufflepuff, stock and listen. Flip must have done something really bad to tick her off that bad. I saw her coming from one of the bathroom stalls early. She smelled awful. And when she walked past me, I was leaving. I got to do like it was almost lost my breakfast. Could it have been a dung bomb? One of my friends was in Lockhart's bathroom when we got pranked. It smelled awful for a good while, too. I believe it. Half the class believes that Flint pranked the professor anyways. I'm surprised they would believe that because I know Flint is pretty. I don't know if Flint, has a, pranking bone in his body. But again, this is your interpretation of the world, so you can always adjust, right? But for an avid Harry Potter reader, I'm at least like, interesting. I wouldn't put it past Slytherins to sabotage one of the greatest wizards teaching us defense against the dark arts. He's just so dreamy. I know. I'm reading the Magic Movie for the second time now. Dad doesn't get why Mom and I love him. He's just perfect. Love it. This is great. And so, like, notice where a lot of like, like watch the, where I'm laughing, it's in your dialogue, right? And so that's another sign, and that's another really helpful thing to evaluate. It's like, hey, if someone's reading it, that's why I do these recorded with the camera on me, is because you can see, oh, hey, where's like Jeff kind of laughing? Where's he like, leaning forward more? Where's, maybe his ADD is kicking in and he's looking around, and that can give you indications of like, hey, what parts are drawing in, what parts are pulling back. So like another, he's just perfect. Are almost gagged at the mere thought of, so we're in RSPOV. Okay, got it. On the way to the killer. Oh, interesting. So this is kind of coming in almost from an omniscient narrator. So that's a little bit weird. It's like this POV feels like it's coming from an omniscient, which doesn't fit what chapter one established. I'd just start with the dialogue. So yeah, I mean, I would just start with like, she leaned on a wall and listened to Hufflepuffs talking. Boom. Like that's, I'm in the scene. I know exactly. She, like leaned behind a piece of armor and, or like, put her hand on her chin at the Great Hall, whatever, and that'll give us more than enough context. So yeah, yeah, always like, so this is one piece of advice I've gotten from my writing teachers many times. I've done done a lot of writing tips about this because I think it's important. Usually, the first and last line of a paragraph are the highest risk for being extra, like extra noise. And same, the first and last paragraph of a chapter are probably the best candidates to cut, right? And so you can see that example here, where if I just boop, boom, like we get it, and you're even bringing up, dung bombs again, so you're doing a good job, like signaling, hey, this is a callback to the previous scene, and so forth. So you know, almost gagged at the thought of the entire Hufflepuff's house adoring the absolute brain-rotted fraud of a wizard. Her father told her how the man couldn't, would not have been able to do, how the man lied. So again, a lot of it is just shortening. Like, would not have been able to do any of the things he claimed, let alone half. Um, so like again, it's just like, okay, how do I compress? Like we know, okay, so but this is really good data, right? Because I know what kind of character doesn't like Lockhart, right? Like, she's really smart, really suspicious, but you laugh because the really smart, suspicious person Hermione was like, oh, Lockhart's not too bad, at first, right? Um, so that shows us things about this character. Hey, if she's seeing through this person, even when Hermione kind of got bamboozled a little bit at first, that means this is a really bright character, really kind of in the know. Watching the girl talking to Marcus Flint, or rather, oh, that's right, it was Marcus Flint. Oh, I thought it was Argus Filch. Never mind, I lied. This is false, incorrect. Lumbermouth. RP Lumbermouth. The students trying to start to laugh. Uh, turn attention back to watching the girl. Da, da, da. What do you think they're talking about? Asked Millicent. Ooh, let's pretend we're them and we're arguing. I always knew that you never knew how to brush your teeth. Well, I mean, this is like right on brand with like, I mean, I think which is awesome. Like, you're matching the humor of the second book, right? Because J.K. Rowling's humor adjusts as the books go on, but she always has a lot of humor in her books. It's, but it kind of like, transforms, like, and so I think this is a really great like snapshot of the, book two Rowling humor. All right, Aura smirked, about to mimic her best impression of Philip when the girl screamed, drawing attention to everyone around them on top of the list. Typical Flint with your lumber mouth. Anna placed a hand up to her mouth as other students around her started to laugh. Wait, what? When the girls scream. Oh, interesting. Oh, okay, okay. The action's a little bit muddied here. I would just break up the paragraphs. Break up the paragraphs to be a bit more clear about who is acting out something and when. Oops. Okay. I'll see you guys later. Tell us how the game goes. Okay. I'm gonna call this one for now. But thank you so much for sharing this with me. I hope this helped. I mean, that was 5 single-space pages. I usually only do 5 double-space pages. So you got the extra, extra, extra. But no, this is awesome. I think you have a lot of really good stuff going here. Again, I think probably like so. What are my overall thoughts? I think the world building's great. I think a lot of these things like the good. Let's see if I can still do this. Oh yeah, so like world building is awesome, and expands on the book's work. Um, I think the dialogue is a highlight. I think when you're in a scene, it flows well. Um, Entering and exiting a scene seem to be a bit trickier, but just don't worry about it. Just cut to the scene already going. So that's probably one thing I would think about is I when you're in a scene when there's characters like like the George and Fred chasing Aura and sort of trying to be like, hey, like who's this fellow, troll person? Um, that works, right? And that moves really well. And so one of the things you can think about is how, the old principle of start every scene late and end every scene early, right? Is, you might not need kind of this extra bit of cushion before you get into a scene, before you get into dialogue, right? And like scenes usually are mostly dialogue, mostly action, right? And the action is like a play-by-play, like Jeff turned, grabbed the little baby tripod, extended out its legs, and bashed his computer camera. Like, that's the play-by-play. But then again, the best place to look at that, I would also say, is the balancing between. So like, cause like to some degree, like the balancing between scene, summary, and dialogue, action, thoughts is the place to work. Would recommend the highlighter. I hope you don't mind that I marked up your thing, but here. So, but yeah, other than that, I think I actually really liked. I mean, I thought everything was doing really well. Um, things. Yeah, I would be. I think like so. One thing I would call out as really good, and you should keep it up, was yes, like her knowing that he's a fraud. Like this is really valuable. You know, the fact that she sees through Lockhart when so many others don't is a huge indicator of who this character of, the smarts and, uh, intel of this character. So like that type of thing is that's what show don't tell is in a lot of ways, right? It's other people are like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. Do you read Magical Me again? And she's, and even if you're just using her interior thoughts and she just thinks wrong, these people are knuckleheads, Lockhart's a fraud. I don't think I'm gonna take the time to explain to these Hufflepuffs how full of crap this guy is. I'll just let them enjoy their fantasy, and off she goes. Like boom, and we know, okay, this person has a cynical streak. They know this person, but they're also pretty bright and pretty smart. Like those are the things that I would really lean into. Is like use the existing characters and contexts of the, Chamber of Secrets, book 2, to show who characters are by comparing them with other, established values in the world. Yeah, overall, I hope this was helpful. Great work. Honestly, I think this is really strong. I'm curious to see what happens next. I think there is tuning. I think there are ways to lean this out to really, really, you know, get that narrative hook sunk. Like, I'm kind of curious of like what's, the big narrative hook. Is there something going on, beneath the surface besides mischief and young moms? And if it's just, mischief, let this be prep for the biggest con of, Fred and George's year, right? Like, so, yeah, if you're like, hey, no, I want this to just be fun mischief with Fred and George, totally valid. But for them, give us that big stakes of like, this is going to be our biggest con of the year, but we need a Slytherin to do it. Maybe there's something with like the lake or whatever, like, who knows? But, that gives the stakes. That gives that arc of the story. Because, like, they're starting the con, they're putting the team together. Like, that gives you a story arc, right? It's just like a heist, right? Where it's like, ooh, you know about the treasure. We're gonna con Gilderoy Lockhart. We're gonna do the biggest con of the year. You know about the Okay, let's get a team. We're gonna need a Slytherin. We're gonna need a Hufflepuff that's great at explosives. We're gonna need whatever. Okay, then we're gonna plan the job. Okay, so this is, we're gonna do it after the Quidditch match and da 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 da. And then we run the job, and then something goes wrong, and then we improvise, and then when the job goes off and everyone's, staring at the Las Vegas fountains, then that's a really really strong high structure, right? Anyways, great job. I hope that's helpful. Good job on the project, and I'm excited to see what you come up with next and how your revisions go.